Welcome everyone. We're just going to wait till everyone flows in. Thank you for our early entrance. We'll get started in a few minutes.
Welcome, everyone. Good to see everybody. As Matt mentioned, we'll be starting in a minute.
It's Wednesday morning. It's the exact midway point of the week. It's a great time to have a webinar.
It's almost lunchtime on the East Coast, Matthew, Gordon.
That's right. That's right. That's happening right after this. Slow trickle. We're getting there. Thank you, everyone. Just holding on to give everyone a chance to flow in. It's 11:01. We'll probably get started in another minute. People will, miss my world-class introduction, but so be it. Okay, well, while our late entrants continue to flow in, I'll get us started here. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining the State of Software in the Recycled Materials Industry, the newest ISRI webinar sponsored by GreenSpark. With us today are Brian Hennessy, Chair of ISRI Board of Directors, as well as Rocky Mountain Recycling GM. And he'll be in a lively, engaging Q&A with Gordon Driscoll, the co-founder / CEO of GreenSpark Software. I'd like to just get it out of the way that the contents of this webinar do not represent the views and beliefs of ISRI or any of its employees, but are the sole property of GreenSpark Software as well as Brian. The way this will work is, as questions arise, feel free to type them, to put them in the chat box. And if you could hold off on them to not interrupt the flow of Brian and Gordon's conversation, we'll tackle them in a first come, first serve fashion at the end of their chat, which should last, approximately 30 minutes. If you want your question to be dedicated to either individual, please put that in the question. Otherwise, both will likely tackle. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Gordon.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. And
No
Brian, I thought you were getting cold feet for just a sec there. But hopefully this isn't too scary.
Gordon, I'm working, all can see I'm working from home today, and I can't control dogs barking. If I put them in the basement, it will be worse. So to the group, I will do my best, and I apologize in advance.
No worries at all. Well, again, thanks everyone for joining. Obviously, the other panelist here, Brian Hennessy, needs no introduction. But my name is Gordon Driscoll. For those who don't know me, I'm the CEO of GreenSpark Software. Our company exists really to help metal recyclers streamline operations, save time and money, and scale businesses with powerful modern technology. But that's not exactly why we are here today. Today, we're really going to be talking, more broadly about the state of software in the recycled materials industry. And obviously, Brian has been very, very generous to join us on this talk. Brian, before we dive into kind of the topic at hand, obviously, I'm guessing almost everyone who's attending here knows you, probably in the capacity as an ISRI chair, but I actually kind of want to take a step back first. I'd love to kind of just hear and have the group hear, your personal story and how you got into the industry before diving into some of the deeper topics.
Great, Gordon. First, let me thank you for inviting me to participate with today's webinar to talk about the software and its impact on the recycled materials industry and the future impact on the industry. I came into this industry through family, or I would say adopted family. I began when I was 14 years old. I am in the recycled metals component of our industry. And I worked like many of my contemporaries. I worked in the yard. I raked the roads. I torch cut. I sorted high temperature alloys. I did some of the safety components of what we had. I started when I was 14 years old. And frankly, the first thing I started is I worked in the tungsten carbide department, which is where I sorted various types of metal lathe tree painting tools. And I was 14 again. And then as time went on, I went to college. And when I was in college, I worked in the summers at the facilities. And I spent a couple of years in the United States Army. And when I ETS out of the Army, again, I went to college. And then after that, I started working in the industry full time. So, gosh, it's been about 42 years that I've been in this industry. And as we're going to get into a little bit more today, this industry, as many, has evolved and changed. And the excitement that I see for the future of the industry is just, it's amazing. I can't wait.
Awesome. Well, I think my next question was going to be, how have things evolved in the last 25 years? It sounds like I might have to expand that horizon just a little bit more. But that's awesome. I think that one of the reasons and one of the things that we always come up with on the software side is that it's easy, on the software side, to sit behind a computer and try to, visualize what happens, but it's impossible to do so without rooting yourself in those physical processes, the actual yard. So I'm really, really glad you started right there. I'd love to kind of hear, from your first time in the tungsten carbide department, not even discussing kind of your involvement in ISRI as the ISRI chair right now, just how has your experience in the yard, specifically at Rocky Mountain, evolved in the last 42 years? And, do you think that that's representative of the evolution of other operations in the industry over that time period?
Wow. Well, as I mentioned, the industry has changed significantly in the last 42 years. But if we want to go back 25 years, and let's look at not only technologies themselves, it seems like yesterday that working in the tungsten department or working in the scales or working the small scales on inbound material, we were doing everything by hand. And then we would get our tickets and we would document them, and we would go to a calculator and we would add it up, and we would hope that we have the proper pricing, and then we would pay the customer. And then technology came, and we were able to take that documents that we were creating to pay and ship customers, and then we would manually put it into an old Unix-based computer system. And we thought we were going to the moon, right? How that was only 20, 25 years ago. And look how much we progressed since then. So just from the software, the computer component, it's moved vastly. But also look at the video part. All of our yards are in the last 25 years. My facility, we have video for our security, where at one point we had to have security guards, and many on this call would know if we had a theft problem or break-ins, the first place you regrettably would look at were the security guards. Well, technology has evolved where we have cameras that do that today. If you look at what we're doing with our safety training and with the technology, and we have online programs that we could use for training, and also we have these programs that are multilingual that assist our employees. So it continues to progress, and it continues to be good for business, and it really helps us manage and control our expenses. If we didn't have software like we have today, and I don't know how we could work like we used to. But I'll add one more point to that on technology and the evolution in the last 25 years. When I was younger, it used to be you would go to lunch and you would come in and you would have messages to return these calls. We did have faxes at that time, but they used to be the curly fax paper. We would receive a fax or two and we would review it, and then we would respond. Today, what do? We receive emails. We get text messages. We get instant messages. We get calls at our desk. We get calls on our cell phone. Wherever we go, everybody has a cell phone. So the connectivity we have with individuals today is almost instant. Now, while that's good, that's also challenging, especially for those that weren't brought up with technology, because there's so many variables which we need to manage. And for me, at times, it becomes a little stressful. So there is the positives, but there are the stressors as well.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think that's what we've found, at least on our side, is that with the advent of technology everywhere, there's a greater importance on, ironically, using technology to sift through the amount of noise that there is, right? Because, with a fax, with a phone call, with answering machines, you could take a breath, you could pause, you could kind of take a step back and analyze what's important. With the inundation of information now with technology, that becomes a lot harder. So I think that's a kind of a good segue into, now that we've kind of covered how you do business has changed, how have you seen, the biggest challenges to your operation change? We've all heard about, the inability to find really good people consistently, obviously market volatility. You could argue that those have, always been there, but I'd obviously love your perspective. What are the kind of biggest challenges today for you guys at Rocky Mountain? Not necessarily the industry just yet, but you guys at, Rocky Mountain, and how have you tried to combat those?
Well, as you mentioned, challenges. I look at every challenge with an opportunity. So taking that mindset, many years ago, it used to be in my company is we would go to work, we would hire people, we would pay our bills, we would pay our taxes, and we would operate. It was so much fun just to buy and sell, as we would call recycled materials. It would be, but now times have changed. We have more market dynamics that are more volatile than that they were before. Part of that is due to technology. We can go into that in a minute if you choose. Second component is we have a regulatory component, which really has been elevating for the past 20 years, but it seems to be J-curving more so in the last 5, particularly since COVID. And then also we have what's really, I think, is a great opportunity, the demand from our communities to be engaged and to be participants. And so the days of us just going to work and operating and running our businesses have evolved to be a more community environmental stewards. And also, we just can't provide jobs. And that's one of the biggest changes, challenges, opportunities. It's just not buying and selling material like we used to before, and then looking for ways to process it.
Yeah, totally. And again, I think that kind of hits on how the business has fundamentally changed. And, I think as a segue to that, when you think about solving, your biggest existential business problems, I think that, as you alluded to, 20, 25 years ago, people didn't even think about software like that just as a class, as a potential solution to these issues. They turn to, hard assets, machinery, people, try to leverage prices as much as they could, or, their relationships, to kind of generate returns, revenue, et cetera. Do you still think that's the case, or do you think that folks have kind of increasingly turned to software as a, almost like painkiller to these big issues? And if folks aren't turning to it, why do you think that is?
You have a couple of components. You have what I like to call revenue revenue generators and revenue drivers, correct? All right. So a revenue generator logically would be you hire a salesperson, right? That individual, it's easy. It's you can measure the performance that this individual is doing. You can look at the revenue that is directly generating from that position. And it used to be, I'm going back 20 years ago, many operators, possibly including myself, were always looking at, I like to invest in revenue generation. Well, that has completely changed. And now we're moving more to revenue drivers. And my definition of a revenue driver is being able for us to help manage our risk and manage our operations. And software, whether it be from your inbound or your shipping, from your equipment, is a critical component of that revenue driver because it will make you more efficient. Let's think about it. How many on this call, and obviously I can't see everyone, so we don't need a hands up, but how many in this call need to communicate with their customers via text message or share pricing or settlement information via texting or via for your out and about in your laptop, right? I mean, we weren't able to do that. So that even though that may not directly generate revenue, that makes you more productive as a revenue driver, which should impact your bottom line. And as software continues to evolve and progress, and it's, as I mentioned before, it's starting to J curve, I see that just being an absolute need. So I think staying at the forefront, staying on top of the technologies will give you a step above those that are not doing it. And it's not only the software, but if you look at some of the, as you mentioned, the equipment, there are in our material recycling facilities, better known as MRFs, we're looking at robotic technologies that are able to separate and sort materials. That's a big progression from, much of it is hand today, but that's a big technology that's going to make us more efficient and make the industry a lot cleaner.
Yeah, I was on the panel actually at ISRI 23 with that robotic sorting company, and people's jaws were like on the floor. They were like,
it's
"Oh my
amazing.
God, I've never seen anything like this!" Like they were identifying Coke cans on a conveyor belt that was going like 60 feet per second. It was like unbelievable. So we'll kind of touch on in just a second some of the advancements in technology and obviously the gap between what's happening at the forefront of technology and what adoption looks like in this industry. But I'm glad that you touched on both kind of software and equipment and some of the drivers of both of those kind of services and vendors to this industry. How have you seen the relationship change between the industry and the services and the vendors that actually service this industry over the last 10 or 20 years? I'm guessing that there's probably slightly more competition today. There's more transparent information on these systems at play. How have you seen that relationship evolve during your time at RMR?
Well, there's several evolutions that I've seen, but one from my experience is we've gone from a transactional approach with vendors and suppliers, equipment suppliers, software suppliers, to more of a partnership component. We used to always talk when we were buying a new material handler or software program, or it would be sometimes it'd be tenuous or tedious in trying to get the best value for the company. I've shifted my thinking to that because I could work with a supplier or a vendor and try to get this ideal price point that's best for me, or maybe even a little better than I expect. But when you do that, you get into that transactional type of relationship. You're not really going to have the best. Both parties aren't going to have the best warm and fuzzy feel. But if you take a partnership approach, that's something that's you're going to get a better service, and you're also your suppliers are going to know you and your business better. And then isn't that great? You have somebody that identifies your needs for you or helps identify needs for you and has solutions. You can't do it all yourself. So a partnership is much more fruitful than having, I would like to say, transactional. And for me, that goes across every interaction with vendors and suppliers.
Yeah, I think that's super insightful. I couldn't agree more. And I think that gets way more important as, ironically, technology gets more complex, right? It used to be, you could understand how a fax machine works. Now, if I ask someone to explain how GreenSpark works, like they would, walk out of the room because these technologies are so complex. And the pivot between just a transaction and a partnership has become definitely on our side really, really important. And kind of again, as a segue to that question, you mentioned.
If I could interject, you
yeah.
mentioned something about the last 25 years that came to my mind is I didn't have an IT department, right? Yeah. Now we have IT departments. At my point, I understand it, but I really don't understand it. I could use it. And I don't think anybody on this call will disagree that when we have software systems go down, it creates disruption. It does cost us money. We didn't have that before, and that's another component of what we're seeing here in the evolution and the progress of technology and how it's going to continue.
Totally, and again, there is quite literally a lot to manage, especially when at least in our view, this is now mission critical in infrastructure, right? People think about mission critical infrastructure as hard assets, equipment, machines, et cetera. What we've found is between server breaches, between hacking, between low connectivity, your digital infrastructure is mission critical infrastructure. And if you don't not only invest in the right tools, but to your point, the right people, you're not going to be able to actually leverage those tools. And one of the things we found, you mentioned that kind of J curve, Brian, in software. I think that's happening in the industry. That's obviously lagging a little bit, kind of broad technology. I'd say evolutions or revolutions, depending on your standpoint. Even over the last 5 years, we've seen, just an amazing increase in technological capabilities. The latest of which everyone has probably heard of, like ChatGPT or AI, really, really powerful tools. And, at least some of that hasn't made, its way to this industry. Back to your kind of comment about partnerships, my theory of why that is because of that partnership element. And I actually personally think that there's a shared responsibility between the vendors and the end customers to understand the value of these products. And I'm not sure that, over time, especially given how quickly things have been moving in tech, the folks in this industry don't really understand, at least fully, the value of all these tools. And again, it's not their fault. It really is a shared responsibility across both those services providers and the end customers to understand that value. That's at least my theory. Do you have any thoughts, or is that similar to kind of how you think around the adoption and the understanding of how powerful these tools can actually be?
Well, that's a broad question. So let me try to drill it down a little bit. With regard to artificial intelligence, we touched a little bit about that, I believe, with the robotics and the robotics company that you're on the panel that had the arms at the MRFs. We're going to obviously see that more in all industries, but that's not something that I'm attuned to or versed on. I'm familiar with it, the ChatGPT. I've been exposed to it a little bit, but it's frankly a little overwhelming for me to take the time to learn. But going back, if I may, also, if you're looking at the collaboration between let's talk about our IT or our technology suppliers and vendors and us as the customers. For the most part, we want our software and our IT and our computers, we want it to work. Right? That's what we're paying for. And if I have a collaboration with my suppliers as opposed to transactional, and I get to know them pretty well, the likelihood is we're going to get a better response and we're going to have frankly, I think you're going to have a better service. Now, in speaking of software systems, I've mentioned this to many people over the years. I think that's just a part of the nature of the beast. There's always quirks with the software, but we always look as the customers. We want to get it fixed fast, or we know it's being addressed, because everyone on this call will say that we have quirks with our software, right? And if we have that collaboration, we have that partnership with our vendors, the brain damage or the frustration, albeit merited, probably is less. And so that's where it's so critical, especially as we progress in technology, that the working relationship between the vendors and the customers, which is us, the recyclers, is not only necessary. I don't think it's going to be possible without it.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I don't think that any software company succeeds if they don't emulate the values and the attributes of the industry. And this is a very, relationship-based industry. So it makes total sense, especially as we move forward and, as potentially, humans or that relationship plays less of a big role in technology, broadly speaking, that companies in this industry and industries, similar to it can maintain that relationship angle and really kind of value in light of how quote unquote impersonal technology can be. So that's definitely something that we focus on. And again, if your kind of software company isn't emulating the values that you espouse in the industry, they're probably not also going to be around for too long. So actually, kind of speaking of which, in terms of the values to the industry and kind of zooming out into the future, in a recent kind of interview, acting as ISRI chair, not Brian at RMR, you mentioned that this industry, kind of broadly speaking, needs to proactively drive initiatives instead of waiting for things to happen. And from an advocacy perspective, it's crucial that we actively interact with lawmakers at the local, state, and federal levels, and that we must be involved in ongoing regulations and potential legislation providing education on recycling-related concerns. And that kind of spoke to the J curve you're seeing in regulation. Two themes I hear screaming from me from that quote is education and transparency. Those are two things that I just mentioned. Software companies can definitely do a better job of in this industry as well. So I guess my question to you is, one, how does the industry kind of broadly speaking do that? And I know that we probably don't have time for your full answer for that. So a smaller question, do you think that software has a role to play in furthering those goals?
Absolutely. Everything we do today in communication, or a majority of what we do, aside from human interaction, is driven by the efficiencies and driven by software and the platforms. To touch on those two, with the education component, our industry and many in heavy industry globally has had a dramatic shift and change in the last 5 years. There's two components that I see, but they're both connected. The first component is as the globe looks to decarbonize or get to net zero, as many use it. That means we're going to have less mining of raw materials from the ground, and the need and necessity of recycled materials is going to be an important tranche within the manufacturing economies, not only here in North America and United States, but globally. Frankly, as the globe looks to get to this net zero or carbon neutral, the main tranche within that supply chain is going to be recycled materials. Therefore, there is no global economy as we want, or decarbonization, without recyclable materials. Now, what does that mean? Most of the world is not aware of our industry. I would say the majority, outside of this phone call, and this I would say is an esoteric group, everyday people probably know more about the medical field or the sports industry than they do about the recycling industry. The recycled materials industry is somewhat, has been under the radar, but as we move and push to net carbon zero, right, there's going to be more regulation, there's going to be more rule makers, there's going to be more legislators who are going to promote and push this. And they are going to be making legislation that is going to have a direct impact. So who knows more about to educate and communicate this industry than the industry, right? We can't have people outside of our space teaching people how to recycle. We're the actual recyclers. We do the work. We make the everyday products that people need. So that's where one of my biggest initiatives is education for adults, and also component. And this is where I see the technology as a significant role is on how we educate school teachers and students within schools. If we're not going to do it, somebody else is going to do it, and frankly, or they're going to do it within their agenda. And the reality is it may not be best for us. So it's really imperative on us as a global industry to get up, and as owners and high managers, we really need to be engaged and promote our industry and within our communities. Now, I could talk for this on an hour, so I was trying to keep it as succinct as possible.
Totally. Yeah, I knew that might have been Pandora's box, but very succinct and helpful answer as as always. And I think that, where software can help is, if folks, understand what prices are and understand that these are valuable metals that they're sitting on that they can recycle. If folks, can see the names of metal recycling operations around, whether it's in digital advertisements, whether it's in different marketing campaigns, whether it's different things like TV ads that a lot of our customers do, and when the experience at the metal recycling operation is good, is seamless, is efficient, all of that can be furthered with great software, and obviously overall improve recycling rates through that transparency, not to mention the regulatory benefits of making sure that, the corporal of who knows what jurisdiction isn't swinging by because they didn't get the right information from your system. I think that software can absolutely further a lot of those goals. The interesting thing
let me add one component to that, and everyone to call. Gordon and I knew we were going to go back and forth and interrupt each other a little bit on this, but let me get into the weeds a little bit on as we're discussing the benefit, merits, importance, and future of software within our industry. Let's just take what we discussed herein, right? Let's just use my facility. I have a recycled materials facility in Commerce City, Colorado. I do paper, plastic, and we also do metals. And I have an inbound shipping managerial software system, right? Let's look at a future where that inbound managerial software system will also tie into, at least some are doing it now, many are doing it now, but that will tie into the website in which I can communicate everything within our company, which will get out of the community. It will also tie into fully our security system. It will also tie into everything that we do can be one platform in which our advocacy, our education, our operations, and our accounting can all be connected. I believe many are doing that now, but I think as we have these systems today, I think this will be the standard, and I think that will be the as I say, the revenue driver for all companies.
Totally. And I mean, you are definitely preaching to the choir there. So I mean, we totally hear you. Everyone wants a single source of truth, a single system of record for that information. And I do really think that that's where you see that revenue generation and those revenue drivers. We kind of touched on the fact that folks aren't all doing that now. And obviously, as technology grows and the efficiency gains of technology start to accrue in this industry, they're obviously only going to benefit the folks that are using that software, at least directly. Indirectly, there will be transparency benefits, hopefully regulatory benefits as well. But what's interesting is that, we found in the recycled materials industry, software spend as a percent of overall revenue is about 0.5%. That is 75% less than the broader industrial average of 2%. Now, there are a number of ways to explain this, right? We've already talked about the relationship between software vendors and the industry overall. The sometimes lack of education and understanding around how powerful these tools are, which is, again, a shared responsibility between the vendors and the customers. So instead of talking about, what you attribute that disparity to, let's take a more positive spin here, which is, I think, my final question of the morning. What do you think, if you were a software company or if you were a vendor in this industry, what do you think we can do to help you, our customers, stimulate investment and adoption in this industry? Is it as simple as helping you understand the value? Is it as simple as making the customer experience easier? If you were me, what would you be looking at to try to stimulate that investment and adoption across the entire entire space?
Well, that's kind of you made a statement, you asked a question with respect to the gap between industry and our recycled materials industry, I believe, with investment in, we'll call it, technology. Am I right? I don't know if to me, that's just a number. I don't know what that truly means, because I will say, I think our industry is one of the most innovative industries by far. I've made this statement several times in speeches that I've made through the course over the globe. We are the most innovative, and that would maybe we may be lagging a little in software, but we still have that innovation. So, there was an American author, Mark Twain, used to say, you have more lies than statistics. So I can't really buy into that number, but let's take another step on that. But to answer your question, how can we continue to progress technology to assist our industry? From a vendor's perspective, I think continue to do what you're doing, continue to do it more, engage with your customers, know your customers and know the industry, right? How can a person that does not know how to process paper or sort or shred automobile, how can you create technologies if you don't understand the process, understand what the challenges are? And at the same time, you need to have the forward vision of the new technologies and how you can incorporate that and for what your customers need. So I think it's pretty simple. It's engagement, and it's relationship, and it's partnership.
Totally. And again, I think in terms of innovation, I completely echo that sentiment. I mean, I visited yards that have used security fencing from retired border walls in the Southeast. I've seen folks build their own structures in the actual buildings out of the recycled material that they ultimately sell. I think that the fact that this industry is being that innovative, almost despite software and that kind of core system of record not keeping up with, I think, broader technological growth, almost speaks even more so to the potential of the industry once we get these tools. I'd say more in place across the overall space. So totally hear you there. And again, thank you a ton for joining us, Brian. Unless you have anything for me.
I just want to give one other follow-up, Gordon. I mean, as we look at it appears to me over the last 25 years, and I'm somewhat of a graph person. We've had if you look at the graph and it's going this way, and it's just J-curving up and how fast technology is coming online. If you look at our recycling facilities, some of the technology that's being tested is mind-boggling. Like, imagine a load of material on your scale, and you can get a X-ray you can get actually everything and what it is, right? I mean, I'm still a little old school. I like to look at loads of material and grade it with my eye, but imagine the technology being there where it just scans and you can get that. I mean, that is a revenue driver, and practically that's where it's going, and those are the opportunities and what we're gonna have. So I'm really excited. It's really excited. And some on this call may say, how am I going to be able to afford these technologies? Well, it's expensive up front, and they all seem to come down in time. And I think if it pays, I think we can figure out a way to do it. Again, we're all innovative entrepreneurs.
Totally. And yeah, I mean, one more example there is, right when, I don't know if you remember, like, drones coming out 10 or 12 years ago.
I use them. I use them when I do inventory twice a year.
Perfect example.
Just to have a record and keep banks happy.
Yep. Density scanning, things like that. Like those aren't like, pie in the sky ideas anymore. And to your point, I mean, those costs were prohibitive 15, 20 years ago. Those have obviously been ground down significantly. And I think that honestly underscores the importance of adoption and investment across technology throughout the yard, because, to your point, before, Brian, if you don't have that, system of record or source of truth that speaks to everything, you just have a drone flying around, right? Which is really cool. But you can't necessarily leverage that information without a solid foundation of technology throughout the overall yard. So awesome. Well, thanks a ton again, Brian, for joining us. I think we'll open it up to questions now if there are any.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Gordon. That was fantastic. So yeah, as I wrote in the chat box, if anyone would like to ask a question, feel free to chat it now. We'll take them in a first come, first served basis. Feel free to ask Brian or Gordon or both.
All right. We covered all points.
Yeah, going once, going twice. And if that is the case, well, thank you both for your time today. For this lively and wonderful discussion. This has been recording and will be made available both on ISRI site, on our social channels, on GreenSpark's social channels, presumably on your side as well, Gordon. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending and for spending their late morning with us. Signing off now.
Thank you,
all.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.